Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Once again, it's been quite a while since I last posted a video, and this is because we've been doing a fair amount of traveling over the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, we headed up to Aomori Prefecture in the northern part of the Honshu Island, or main island of Japan. And there we stayed in the Towada Lake region. Towada Lake is a really giant, volcanic lake, which was formed when by the collapse of a large volcano. It's one of the most beautiful lakes in, the Honshu area of Japan, or the northern part. Very similar to, Lake Toya up in Hokkaido, but much less crowded with tourists. There's a beautiful river which runs from Towada Lake toward the sea, and it has amazing waterfalls and incredible trees and forests and scenery, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. One of the good things about this area is it's kind of off the beaten path for tourists and not at all crowded. And if you want a place where you can enjoy the most beautiful natural scenery in Japan, I really recommend the Towada Lake and the area around it. And then most recently, just the day before yesterday, we returned from Miyako Island, or Miyako-jima, which is a small group of little islands kind of in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific between Okinawa and Taiwan. It's not a good idea to visit a tropical island in July because the weather, of course, there's going to be warm under any circumstances, but in July it's incredible. Imagine going to Las Vegas in July and adding 80% humidity, and that gives you kind of like an idea of what Miyako-jima is like. Normally we wouldn't think to go there this time of year, but we had some friends visiting from Europe and they really wanted to see it, so we headed down there and actually had a pretty good time when we weren't outdoors. The beaches are the most beautiful in Japan. That's the most famous thing about Miyako-jima. And also it's famous for mangoes and bananas and coconut crabs, which are really big crabs which get to be about as big as house cats. And they come out at night and they're kind of harmless, but they're kind of spooky to anyone who isn't familiar with them. Overall, we had a pretty good stay, and we're probably going to go again, but in a time, maybe in October when the weather's a little bit better. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the subject of today's video, and it's going to be a camera which I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and this is the Canon EF. The Canon EF is a really well-made tank-like camera, very similar in appearance to the Canon F1, which was Canon's top-of-the-line professional model. And from anything more than a short distance away, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the EF and the F1. Both have the same, FD lens mount, and the same outline and about the same weight. But the EF manages to pack in a lot of features which are not available on the F1. And I'll go ahead and point those out as I describe the camera and its controls, features, and functions. So as usual, I start off on the top of the camera on the left-hand side, and of course, this camera is very similar to others. You'll find the film rewind knob with a pop-out handle here, and if you pull up all the way on it, that it's also the latch release for the film door. Below that, we have the film speed adjusting ring. So when you buy your film, if it's like 100, 200, or 400 speed film, you simply lift up the dial and turn it so the number matches the film you have loaded inside. In the front here, we have a multi-purpose LED, which illuminates in various circumstances. For example, if you're taking a long exposure, or an automatic exposure, it will light up and let you know that the shutter is open. And this also doubles as the battery check lamp. And the check lamp button is located here on the bottom. Here is probably one of the most interesting features on the camera. This is an AE lock. And one problem that we have sometimes with automatic cameras is they kind of take a general light reading when they are calculating exposure. And in certain situations, the general reading is not going to work very well. For example, if you're shooting people skiing in the snow, it's going to underexpose things, and if you're shooting, say, people in under the shade of a tree or something which is black, it's going to overexpose. And if you want to get the proper light reading on these, you either have to adjust the exposure one way or the other, or in the case of this camera, you can simply use the AE lock. And how this works is if you want more exposure, you will simply point the camera at something a little bit darker until the aperture needle moves down in the camera, and hold the button down, and then lift back up and point the camera at your subject and take your photograph. And if you want less exposure, you'd point it at something lighter and push down the button and then take your photograph. It's a very simple way to increase or decrease exposure without turning knobs or buttons or anything like that. It's very fast and efficient, and it was a wonderful feature for this camera, and something which makes this camera markedly better than the Canon F1. On the top here we have, of course, a shoe for mounting a flash, and this is a hot shoe. This can be used with pretty much any flash, and it has automatic operation if you use it with the Canon dedicated flash units, which were sold alongside the camera. On the right side here, of course, we have the film winding and shutter charging dial, and on the center we have the shutter release button, which accepts a standard cable release. And around this we have the film speed dial, which is quite a large dial. It has to be kind of large because it has a ridiculous number of settings, everywhere from 30 seconds up to 1/1000th of a second, and of course bulb. Now, the interesting thing about this camera is it has a hybrid shutter system, which is partially electronically controlled and partially manually controlled. For the slow speeds from 1 second to 30 seconds, really long speed there, it is regulated by an electromagnet which selects the exact shutter speed, and in the faster speeds it is a mechanically operated shutter. So kind of interesting system which worked really well, and I love the idea. It offers you the reliability of a mechanical shutter, and also the ability to take really long exposures which are electronically controlled. And over here on the right side here we of course have the film counter window. On the back of the camera we have an operating switch or power switch located on this side here, on and off, and it says to make sure to turn off the camera after you use it. In the center here we have a button, and this button is actually for taking multiple exposures. If you push in this button and wind the film, it will actually just charge the shutter but not wind the film, and allow you to take 2 or more exposures on the same part of the film. Here, of course, we have the viewfinder eyepiece, and it's dovetailed around the sides here, so you can attach an eye cup or a magnifier or a diopter adjustment lens to match it to your eyesight. On the inside, we have a couple of different systems. On the bottom, we have a range of shutter speeds, which so when you adjust the shutter dial, it will move a pointer across the bottom to let you know which shutter speed you have selected. And on the right side, when you're shooting in AE mode, you will see the light meter move up and down, and it lets you know what aperture the camera is selecting. And over on this side here, we have what is called the cat switch, and this is for operating the camera in aperture controlled or aperture automatic exposures, not aperture priority, but shutter priority. And in most cases, you'll just keep it in the normal setting, but if you're using the dedicated flash, you will set it, of course, to the flash setting. On the bottom of the camera here, we have 2 battery covers, and since this was an electronically controlled camera, or is an electronically controlled camera, it requires more battery power than it would if it were something, that just had a light meter and no electronic regulation. This camera normally it would use 2 MR9 1.35 volt mercury batteries, but you can use adapters which will allow you to use normal LR44 or SR44 batteries. You can also use wine cell batteries, which are available on eBay or Amazon or places like that. The best thing to do is try to get the 1.3 volt adapters. These have diodes built into them, so you can put in a 1.5 volt battery, and it will automatically adjust it down to 1.3 volts and allow for the most accurate metering. Here we have a standard 1/4" tripod socket located under the center, which is a great feature. And here we have the release button for rewinding the film. On the side here we have the self-timer with the self-timer release button. And on the bottom here we have a multi-purpose lever which is stops down the lens and allows I guess what we call a depth of field preview. And of course we have the lens mount itself, and this is, as I said, it has the FD mount, which allows you to mount a ridiculous number of lenses. Canon made all kinds of lenses in the FD mount, anything from fisheyes and super wide angles up to super telephotos, and even ones which refracting lenses, or telescope lenses, which you could attach to this camera. When you're shooting in the automatic mode, you have to set the lens to work in automatic, and that means you depress this lock button here, and you turn the dial until it's lined up in the center, and that will lock the aperture ring, and that allows the camera to select the correct aperture. If you want to set the aperture manually, you can simply take it away from the automatic setting and just turn the aperture to what the camera recommends when you're looking at the light meter. To mount the lens, you make sure that the bayonet ring is turned all the way to the left, and you line up the mark, put it on the top, and turn it clockwise tightly, and that will hold it in place. This camera will also accept the new FD lenses, which don't have the bayonet ring. They just simply have a button which you push to remove and replace the lens. It works quite well with all of them. These cameras are really wonderfully made. They are very reliable. Pros often use these as a secondary camera to their F1 system. Not that a lot of pros used the Canon cameras back in the day. Nikon pretty much had a monopoly on the market. Though here in Japan, Canon was very popular with newspaper photographers and a lot of professionals. It's definitely a professional quality camera, definitely what I guess we would call nowadays the prosumer camera, and a great camera for someone who wants something which is a little bit easier to use than an F1 and also has more features which might make it a little bit more user-friendly. Loading the film is quite simple. You simply open the film door like so. This camera has a vertical shutter in the back made out of metal. It doesn't have the cloth shutter, so it's a little bit more reliable in that way. The metal shutters aren't going to suffer from deterioration or getting holes burn them if you happen to leave the camera sitting and so the sun shines on it. When you're loading the film, make sure to pull open the lever all the way, drop in your film cassette or canister, close it like so to hold it in place. Pull your film meter across and feed it into the slot here, and of course this camera luckily has a knurled knob on the side which allows you to start winding in the film, and simply just twine that until the film is pulled across and the holes on the top and the bottom of the film are being caught by the teeth here in the take-up sprocket. Then simply close the camera, and you'll have to switch it on and then simply start wind it and operate it a few times until the number 1 is showing in the window and the camera is ready to go. Anyway, that's it for my video about the Canon EF camera. If you have any comments about this camera, feel free to leave them in the section below. If anyone wants to share their experiences with one of these cameras, that would be welcome. If anyone has any requests on videos they would like to see, I know I've got requests for the Topcon cameras and a few other ones. I'll go ahead and try to get those. I recently got a Topcon. I'll try to get a video done about that. And that's about it for this video. If you like the video, please click the like button. If you want to see more videos, please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.